We all know the mother of dragons, Daenerys Targaryen, but most of what we know comes from the HBO series, unless you've read the books. If that's not the case, you've come to the right video. Today, I'm going to briefly tell you about Daenerys Targaryen's life before the events of Game of Thrones. In the year 284 AC, in the ancient and mystical Dragonstone, the legendary stronghold of House Targaryen, a girl was born, destined to change the fate of Westeros. But her arrival was not a moment of celebration. Instead, it was a sign of a storm that reflected the chaos her family was facing. Daenerys Targaryen was born after the death of her father, King Aerys II, known as the Mad King, and Queen Rhaella Targaryen, who was also his sister. Her birth took place in the midst of a violent tempest that swept across the island, where her mother had sought refuge. As the wind howled and waves crashed violently against the shores, Rhaella gave birth to her daughter, but joy quickly turned to sorrow when she died during childbirth. This event gave her the nickname Daenerys Stormborn. From her very first breath, her life was marked by tragedy and loss, a heavy burden for such a young girl. By the time she was born, Daenerys already had an older brother, Viserys Targaryen, born roughly 2 years earlier, as well as an older brother, Rhaegar Targaryen, who had died before she came into the world. But the history of her family was steeped in tragedy, and Daenerys would be no exception. Her childhood began during a time of extreme tension for House Targaryen. Her father, the Mad King, had become unpredictable and tyrannical. His erratic and cruel behavior not only alienated the nobles of the Seven Kingdoms, but also instilled fear in his subjects. Aerys's drastic decisions led to acts of brutality that sparked a rebellion, ultimately leading to his death just before Daenerys was born. Robert Baratheon's rebellion was more than just a war. It was a cataclysm that tore Westeros apart and had devastating consequences for the Targaryen family. After Aerys II's downfall and Robert Baratheon's rise to the throne, Viserys and Daenerys were taken to the city of Braavos by Sir Willem Darry, the Master-at-Arms of the Red Keep. This journey marked the beginning of their life in exile, a chapter filled with suffering and the struggle to survive. In Braavos, Daenerys and Viserys lived under the protection of Sir Willem Darry. He became a guardian figure, trying his best to protect the young Targaryens, though his means were limited. Life in exile was harsh and fraught with danger. The Targaryens faced poverty and the constant threat of being discovered. Their living conditions were dire, and Daenerys' status as an exiled princess brought neither safety nor stability. During these years, Daenerys and Viserys grew up in an atmosphere of instability and desperation. As the older brother, Viserys assumed the role of protector, but his love was possessive and his ambition insatiable. Often, he took his frustration and pain out on Daenerys, creating a toxic relationship. Viserys' desire to reclaim his birthright turned into emotional abuse that left deep scars on the young girl. As time passed, Daenerys had limited contact with the outside world. Her education was basic. Although Sir Willem tried to teach her about her heritage, their lack of resources and the constant need to remain hidden hindered her learning. Young Daenerys grew up without the chance to explore the world that had been taken from her, and her future seemed bleak. Sir Willem Darry died a few years later, and the 5-year-old Daenerys mourned his loss. The house with the red door, where she had lived up until that point, became a symbol of the childhood she never truly had. Without the protection of an adult, her situation became even more precarious. The few remaining servants stole everything they had, leaving Daenerys and Viserys destitute and living in extreme poverty. Life in the free cities was a path filled with hardship. Viserys and Daenerys wandered the cities for years, seeking support for their cause, but all they received were empty promises. Desperate and ruined, Viserys was forced to sell what little they had left, including their mother's crown. This earned him the name the Beggar King, an echo of his helplessness and disillusionment that haunted every corner of his life. Over time, Viserys' frustration turned into bitterness and obsession with his claim to the Iron Throne. For him, Daenerys became the easiest outlet for his frustrations. As the years passed, he even blamed her for their mother's death, constantly warning her not to wake the dragon, a reminder of her potential and what their lives could be if they ever reclaimed the throne. Daenerys lived under immense pressure. She grew up believing that one day she would marry her brother, reinforcing the Targaryen tradition of keeping the bloodline pure through dynastic incest. These distorted teachings shaped her understanding of what it meant to be a Targaryen and left her torn between loyalty to her family and the desire to free herself from her brother's expectations. Despite the emotional weight she carried, Daenerys possessed an uncommon beauty: long, pale silver gold hair and striking violet eyes that were as bright as gems. Her beauty attracted countless suitors seeking her hand in marriage, some hoping to gain control of her 3 dragons, which had not yet come into her life. Her vulnerability and beauty made her a symbol of hope for some, but also an object of desire for many. With only her brother by her side, Daenerys grew into a timid and docile young woman. Her life was marked by the constant fear of being discovered and killed by Robert Baratheon's agents. Meanwhile, Viserys frequently abused her, leading to her fearful, submissive, and secretive nature. Despite her circumstances, Daenerys began to realize that most of Viserys's plans to retake the 7 kingdoms were unrealistic. With no clear memories of Westeros, her brother's dream meant little to her. Instead, she longed to return to the house with the red door in Braavos, the place where she had spent her early years, a refuge that now seemed unreachable. In time, the Targaryens' fortunes would change again. Eventually, they found aid and support in the city of Pentos when Daenerys was a teenager. A powerful magister, Illyrio Mopatis, invited them to stay in his mansion, offering his assistance in reclaiming the Iron Throne. This meeting marked a turning point in Daenerys' life, a step towards her destiny that would not only change her fate, but also the fate of all Westeros. Thus began the journey of Daenerys Targaryen, a story of resilience, struggle, and the pursuit of power. From her tragic birth to her transformation into the Mother of Dragons, every experience shaped her character and prepared her to claim what was rightfully hers. But her path would not be easy. Every decision, every challenge brought her one step closer to her true destiny. As Daenerys began to emerge from the shadows of her past, she prepared to face a world that had forgotten House Targaryen. With her courage and determination, she was ready to challenge those who had tried to erase her legacy and reclaim her place in history. And so, the journey of Daenerys Targaryen continues, a story of fire and blood, of dragons and kingdoms, a saga that still captivates all who hear her name.